Marie had taken Monday off to recover from the wedding. James had left in the morning, and she had been lounging in the living room with a book she was trying to read in vain because her thoughts were constantly reminding her of the previous day. She realized, as it was getting dark, that she had forgotten to have lunch and was feeling hungry. She got up and went to the kitchen to see if she could make something quick, like scrambled eggs, when the familiar roar of a motor sounded in the street, and the opening of the garage door startled her. It could only be Alex, of course. He didn't have the key to the door, but she knew he had the garage remote in the car and was coming in through the garage. Suddenly, she remembered she was in her pajamas. She also suddenly realized that if he was here, had he already had dinner? She panicked, indecisive between running to her room or finding something to eat when he practically materialized in front of her. She was left speechless as he placed 2 containers of Chinese food on the table and simply said, "I brought dinner. Shrimp chop suey, right?" She nodded, not knowing what else to do. He gestured to the chair with a smile, and she sat down. He went to the fridge, took out a bottle of white wine, went to the cupboard to get 2 glasses, and served both of them. They picked up the chopsticks that came with the food and began eating in silence. To an outside observer, aside from Marie's demeanor, nothing would seem unusual, a sort of routine established over the years. After they finished eating, he made 2 espresso coffees, which they drank in silence. Then he went to the cupboard for a glass, took 2 ice cubes from the fridge, searched for his whiskey in the drinks cabinet, filled the glass, sat back at the table, and took a sip of the whiskey, which tasted like life to him. "I missed this whiskey," he confessed to Marie, who remained stunned. Then he finally said, "I think we need to talk." They got up, went to the living room, sat on the couch, and Marie stayed silent, observing his relaxed demeanor, which completely unsettled her. In fact, she still couldn't believe what was happening. Alex stared at her for a while, as if waiting, but she really didn't know what to do. He finally began, "I don't want you to justify anything. What you did has no justification, and you knew I knew that, even when you convinced yourself otherwise. You can't imagine the pain you caused, so don't even think about asking for forgiveness for something you can't even comprehend. And we both know you don't deserve it." She looked at him. Those words resonated within her somehow, but she couldn't quite explain why. "That said, what on earth made you think you could humiliate me like that?" She stood still, thinking, and only after a while answered, "There was never any humiliation there. I understand that you felt that way, but if you look closely at where we were, everyone was in the same boat. They were all going to go through the same situation. It's not like everyone was there to witness what happened between us. Most of the people there didn't even notice anything. There was no intention to humiliate you." Alex nodded, accepting the answer. "Why did you want to do that?" "The short and obvious answer is that I was stupid." "And the long one?" "Well, the long one might be full of excuses and justifications that are stupid, as you already know. Still, here we are. I can guess what you're going to say, but I still want you to try to explain it to me." Marie took a deep breath. What could she say? "You know, for years I listened to my friends talking about the meetings. How exciting they were. The unpredictability. The lack of risk since there were no emotional attachments. But what made me want it to happen the most was what they said happened the next day when they returned home and how they and their husbands made love with passion and excitement after that night. But even more than that, how they felt even more connected to their husbands after the experience. And I started imagining that with you. And my friends, when I started to show some interest, kept nagging me to convince you. They all found you attractive, and every single one of them wanted to play with you. Why didn't you ever talk to me about this?" "Alex, if I had talked to you about the existence of this club, and what my friends were doing, you would probably get upset if I continued hanging out with them. Let alone propose something like that to you. What would you have done if I had suggested going to a swing party, even though it wasn't just a simple couple-swapping party like all the others? Probably have you committed to a facility to figure out what was going on in your head. Stupidly, I convinced myself you would be angry, but when you went through the same experience, even if you never wanted to repeat it, you would understand. I was really curious about being with another man just once in my life, and you, well, I know you, and if you took advantage of your night of freedom, you would make some woman extremely happy. And when I found out it was Lisa who was with you, I was so happy. There are beautiful women, but Lisa. Alex agreed. I was a little worried when Lisa spoke to me after leaving here, and I just kept thinking about getting home. Alex let the silence linger in the room for a while as he continued to sip his whiskey. Then he asked, and was satisfying your curiosity worth it? No. Not at all. Not at the time, nor in the aftermath. Well, at the time, it was worth it, but not for the sex itself. The truth is that the excitement I felt from doing something, naughty, forbidden, was exciting me to the point where I could only think about what I was going to do to you when I got home, if Lisa hadn't left you dried up. Alex nodded. He finished his whiskey and got up to serve himself again. Do you want anything for yourself? A red wine, if you don't mind. He returned from the kitchen with the whiskey and handed her a glass of red wine. And you? She finally asked. Me? He paused for a moment to think about what he was going to say next. The moment I realized what was happening, I felt deceived, even more so when I realized that you seemed to be trying to hide from me. The moment I told you we should leave, and you chose to stay, I felt like you had no respect for me, and at that moment, I was certain you didn't love me. Because if you love, you respect, but you dismissed what I told you to your face and moved on. The moment you turned your back on me and left with another man, you ripped my heart from my chest, threw it on the ground, and stomped on it. I don't think you'll ever know what I felt. Marie looked at him and said, if you had told me that the day before yesterday, I would have agreed with you. But yesterday, when Paola said goodbye to you with that kiss, I understood. You know, at that moment, I felt it. My heart being ripped from my chest. But I also remembered a conversation I had here with Lisa and Fernando that Saturday, where he said he always hoped his number would be drawn before hers, so he wouldn't have to watch her leave with another man, and that when it wasn't him, he preferred to step back and not see. But he was there of his own free will, right? Yes, but it was a long conversation where he explained why the club came to be and what led him to participate and let Lisa participate. In short, and apparently, it's like this for most husbands in the club, they are all professionally successful, but as you know, that comes at a price, physical absence. But they all love their wives, and the fear that, due to the lack of that physical presence, they would become emotionally and intimately involved with other men and end up ruining their marriages led them to create this escape. It's not that they don't benefit either, but it's not what they wanted to happen. When Lisa realized that Fernando was completely okay with going but only went to try and prevent something from happening that would make her drift away, she immediately put an end to their visits to the club. Since then, they've become a model couple. Fernando travels a lot, and I usually accompany him as his assistant, but most of the time, Lisa insists on going too. Yes, we talked the day before yesterday. I was expecting to be insulted for the way I treated Lisa, and I was shocked when they thanked me. You also don't need to martyr yourself over what happened with Lisa. I don't know if you noticed, but she didn't complain at all and loved being with you, even in the state of mind you were in. You know, I can hardly remember what happened that night. I have vague memories of Lisa being in the car talking to me about you, vague memories of what I did. I think that until I made the decision to leave that morning, everything seems like a memory of a nightmare. I have a general idea, but nothing concrete. But at that moment, I hated you as much as I loved you, and I knew that if I stayed home and you came in with a smile on your face after spending the night with another man, I would go insane. And it wouldn't matter at all what you would say to me. I wouldn't trust you and would spend my life wondering if you had done this before, with whom. I understand. But what made you come back? As I told you yesterday, being close to death, spending a week in an induced coma, 2 weeks groggy with drugs in a hospital bed not knowing if I would ever be able to stand again, and months in physical therapy changes your perspective a bit. And then. Paola once told me something that stuck with me. To punish you, I gave up on living. You know that until I was injured, I only left my hole to go somewhere with the kids. The only people I had any contact with were work colleagues and the security staff. And then I convinced myself that you had moved on with your life, and I would, one day, end up moving on with mine. As I told you yesterday, being close to death, spending a week in an induced coma, 2 weeks groggy with drugs in a hospital bed not knowing if I would ever be able to stand again, and months in physical therapy changes your perspective a bit. And then, Paola once told me something that stuck with me. To punish you, I gave up on living. You know that until I was injured, I only left my hole to go somewhere with the kids. The only people I had any contact with were work colleagues and the security staff. And then I convinced myself that you had moved on with your life, and I would, one day, end up moving on with mine, wherever that might be. I had no intention of coming back. But here you are. Yes, here I am. Why? Because of your letter. Letter? What letter? Alex took some folded sheets of paper out of his jacket pocket and handed them to her. She unfolded the sheets, realized what they were, and finally understood that he had used her own words to start this conversation. She was astonished, staring at the papers. I threw those papers in the trash. I was just venting. When I found out you had been shot, I just wanted to rush to your side. How? Patricia found them in the trash the next morning and kept them. And when I told her that either the wedding would be somewhere else or I wouldn't come, and she asked why, I told her that I really didn't want to face complications because of the divorce. That's when she gave me the letter and told me that we weren't divorced. Marie just shook her head with a smile, not wanting to believe it. Life is so strange sometimes. So, what now? Where do we stand? Now, what do you want, Marie? I want you, Alex. I want you. You know it's a long road. We're not going to snap our fingers and have everything go back to the way it was. I'm not who I was, nor are you. She simply nodded in agreement. Do you want to try? He asked. More than anything. They continued talking through the night, bringing each other up to speed on the last 2 years, and at the end of the night, Marie went to her room and Alex to the guest room. Marie felt a little sad that he wasn't in bed beside her but immensely happy that at least he was under the same roof.